My parents blew my $60,000 college fund on my sister's wedding. 10 years later, they begged me to raise her abandoned kids. I slammed the door in their face. I'm 28 now, but this all began back when I was around 17, just wrapping up high school and dreaming about going to college. Money was always something we had to watch closely in our family. My parents never pretended we were rich, but they always told me and my older sister Nancy that they'd do everything they could to support our education. Actually, my mom's parents started a college fund for me the day I was born. They'd add to it pretty often over the years. And once I was old enough to work part-time in high school, I pitched in too. Every paycheck, I'd put away a bit more. I was aiming for a solid engineering school, and I knew it wouldn't come cheap. That fund became my safety net, my promise to myself that I could reach higher. I checked the balance sometimes just to see it growing. It gave me a quiet kind of pride, like I was building something real. It felt safe. It felt like my future. Nancy, my sister, is 3 years older than me. She never really cared much for academics, which was fine. She had her own goals. Right after high school, she got a job. Then, at 22, she got engaged to a guy named John. Everyone was thrilled, especially my mom. At first, they talked about keeping things small, just a modest wedding within their means. John's side was supposed to pitch in a little too. And honestly, I was happy for her. We were never best friends or anything, but she was still my sister. But then things started shifting. All of a sudden, Nancy was talking about grander plans, fancier venue, designer gown, hundreds of guests, and a luxury honeymoon. My mom seemed totally swept away in the excitement. She kept repeating that Nancy deserved the best, that this was her special moment. I didn't pay much attention at first. I was drowning in college applications, prepping for finals, thinking about where I'd end up next. I had tunnel vision, really. But I overheard snippets of conversations, my mom sounding more and more stressed, my dad unusually quiet. That was his thing. Whenever she spiraled, he just shut down. A couple times, my mom even asked if I could lend her some cash. Nothing huge, just to cover some bills, she said, and promised to pay me back. She never did, but I was so wrapped up in school stuff, I didn't really think about it. She'd also make these weird little comments like, "You've got your savings, you're set," and it left me with this weird feeling in my gut. Still, I figured she was just overwhelmed. The wedding finally came, and wow, it was extravagant. Way bigger than anything I thought they could afford. Nancy looked like she'd stepped out of a bridal magazine. My mom? She was glowing. But I couldn't ignore the pit forming in my stomach. All I could think was, how are they paying for this? I told myself to mind my own business. Maybe John's family covered most of it. Maybe they took out a loan. Then a few months later, the letters started rolling in. College acceptance after college acceptance. And then it came, my dream school said yes. I was over the moon. I ran through the house waving the letter. My parents said they were proud, but something about their tone felt off. Like they were holding something back. I ignored the vibe, I was too thrilled to care. My school needed a deposit to hold my spot. Tuition would follow soon after. So I went to the bank to take out money from the college fund, the one my grandparents started and I had worked hard to build. I walked in feeling grown up, ready to take this step into the future I'd earned. The teller asked for my ID and pulled up the account. I noticed her expression change. She typed some more, then asked me to verify my info again. That's when she told me. The account was practically empty. I think it had maybe $100 left. I froze. At first, I thought she was looking at the wrong account. I told her there had to be a mistake. There should have been tens of thousands of dollars in there. My savings. My grandparents' contributions. She looked uncomfortable and gently explained that there had been several large withdrawals over the past few months. All authorized. I asked who had made them and she confirmed it. My parents. I couldn't even speak. I just nodded, thanked her in some automatic way, and walked out into the street. It felt like the world had tilted under me. My heart was racing. My skin went cold. I couldn't process it. When I got home, I was still shaking. My parents were just sitting on the couch watching TV like everything was normal. I asked them what happened to the money. At first, they dodged it. My mom told me we'd talk later. But I pushed harder. I told them what the bank said. Eventually, they came clean. They admitted they used my college fund to pay for Nancy's wedding. My mom started crying, saying they didn't know how else to afford the wedding Nancy wanted. She said they meant to pay it back before I needed it, but it just never happened. The costs kept climbing. My dad sat there silent, barely meeting my eyes, muttering something about doing what was right for Nancy. I exploded. I yelled. I screamed. I asked how they could do this to me, how they could steal my future like it was nothing. I reminded them that the money wasn't a gift, it was a promise for my education. My grandparents had saved it. I had worked for it. I asked if one day of fancy pictures was worth more to them than my entire future. My mom shot back that I was being selfish. That family makes sacrifices for each other. She said Nancy deserved that wedding, and I could always go to a cheaper school nearby. Or get a job and save up again. She told me I was smart, I'd figure it out. Then Nancy showed up, and her timing was perfect in the worst way. She joined the argument, saying I was blowing things out of proportion. That it was just money. That her wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime moment and they'd pay me back eventually. She even accused me of trying to ruin her joy. The whole thing turned into chaos. My mom was crying and yelling. Nancy was screaming at me. I was yelling back, and my dad just sat there, not saying a word in my defense. I told them I felt betrayed. That I wasn't part of the family, just the backup plan they could bleed dry. I remember shouting that I hated them. That they had destroyed everything I'd worked for. That night, I packed a small bag with some clothes and all my important papers. I walked out the door and didn't look back. I stayed at a friend's place for a few days. I was numb. I couldn't cry. Couldn't eat. I couldn't even bring myself to talk about it. In the end, I missed the deadline for my deposit. I couldn't go to college that year. I had no money. No help. My friends' parents were kind, but I couldn't stay there long term. Eventually, I found a cheap room to rent and picked up a second job working overnight shifts in a factory. I had to start over, from scratch. Working at the diner during the day and in the factory at night left me completely drained. I was running on fumes. My dream of going to college was shoved onto the back burner indefinitely. My parents tried calling me a few times, and Nancy even sent some angry texts accusing me of tearing the family apart just because I was being dramatic and unforgiving. I blocked them all. I didn't want to hear their excuses or any twisted version of the truth. They didn't just hurt me, they stole from me. They robbed me of the future I had built, dollar by dollar, hour by hour. And by doing that, they showed me exactly where I ranked in their list of priorities. It took years for me to even start getting back on my feet. Eventually, I enrolled in community college, taking night classes while still working during the day. After that, I transferred to a state university, but not without taking out huge student loans and juggling constant work to make ends meet. It was so much harder than it ever needed to be. I did get my engineering degree, just not on the timeline I imagined, and definitely not without a crushing amount of debt that I'm still paying off to this day. But I built a life from the ground up. I have a small apartment now, and a decent job. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. Still, the emotional scars from those years linger. The resentment, the pain, it never really faded. It's been about a decade since I last spoke to my parents or Nancy. I heard through a distant cousin a few years ago that Nancy and John ended up having a couple of kids, but I never asked for any more details. I didn't want to know. Then last week, something happened. I had just gotten home from work and was making myself some dinner when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I glanced through the peephole, and my heart sank. It was my parents. They looked so much older, tired, anxious. My mom was crying. I just stood there, frozen for a while. Then I slowly opened the door, just enough to engage the chain lock. My mom immediately started talking. Her voice was shaky, full of tears. She said they needed me, that things were bad. My dad stood behind her, looking completely helpless. Then she dropped the bomb. Nancy had left. Just packed her things, walked out on her husband and their 2 kids, who were now around 5 and 7. John, her husband, had fallen apart and apparently dumped the kids on my parents, saying he couldn't handle them alone and needed time to get his life together. Now my parents, both in their late 60s, were suddenly full-time caregivers with no energy, no resources, and no idea what to do. My mom kept crying, saying they were overwhelmed, and then she said the words that nearly made me slam the door in her face. "You have to help us. Your family. Family always comes first. These are your nibblings, your sister's children, your blood." She told me they were hoping I could either take the kids in or provide a significant amount of financial support to help raise them. And I just stood there, staring at her. That same feeling from the bank all those years ago came roaring back like it never left. It was like I was 17 again, panicked, betrayed, gutted. All I could think about was that college fund. The dreams they stole. The years I spent digging myself out of a hole they put me in. The debt I'm still trapped under because they prioritized a flashy wedding over my entire future. And now, after a full decade of silence, after never once apologizing or making it right, they were back on my doorstep expecting me to fix the mess Nancy made of her life. All because family comes first. The audacity was almost laughable. But I didn't scream. Not this time. I just felt cold. I told them, plain and simple, that they made their choices long ago. That they taught me exactly what family meant to them and where I stood in it. I told them they spent my future on Nancy, so now they could turn to Nancy and figure it out. And then I closed the door. Right in the middle of my mother's sobs and pleas. I stood there behind the door for a long time, listening to her cry on the other side. Eventually, I heard them leave. Since then, I've been a mess. Part of me can't stop thinking about those kids. It's not their fault. They didn't ask for any of this. And yet, here they are, caught in the middle of a disaster they didn't create. But then the anger hits me all over again. I remember how my parents cut me loose when I needed them most. How they drained my savings, dismissed my pain, and never once tried to make amends. That bitterness comes back like a wave and drowns out any guilt I feel. They've been calling again, leaving angry voicemails now, calling me heartless. I haven't picked up. And here I am, torn between feeling justified and wondering if I'd become cold, heartless even, for refusing to help those kids. For turning my back on people I used to call family. So Reddit, AITA for slamming the door in my parents' faces when they begged me to help raise my sister's kids after they spent my entire college fund on her wedding and then vanished for 10 years? Update 1. Hey everyone. First, thank you. I honestly didn't expect such a huge response to my story, but I've read so many of your comments and messages. It's been overwhelming, but also really validating. A lot of what you all said just echoed what I'd already been feeling deep down, and that helped. There were a few common questions, so I want to clear some things up. The college fund wasn't small. Between years of my grandparents' contributions and the money I put in from working almost full-time during summers and part-time during school, the account had about $60,000 in it. This was in the early 2010s, so that money would have covered nearly all of my tuition, room, and board at the state university I'd planned on attending. Maybe not the full 4 years, but close. I could have graduated with little to no debt. Instead, I left college owing tens of thousands. The account was a joint savings account, meaning my parents had legal access to it. A huge mistake on my part, I realize now. But I was a teenager, and I trusted them. As for Nancy's wedding, it was excessive. Over the top for what our family could realistically afford. From what I remember, and from what I've pieced together since it was held at a big venue, she wore a designer or custom replica dress, they had a sit-down dinner for over 150 people, an open bar, a live band, and then took a 2-week honeymoon to Hawaii. It looked like something out of a wedding magazine. My mom was a teacher's aide, and my dad worked a mid-level office job. There was no way they could afford that without draining my fund. In terms of apologies or repayment, there's been none. Not a single serious apology, not even a half-hearted attempt to make things right. After the initial explosion when I found out, their calls were all about how I needed to let it go for the sake of family. That I was the cruel one for cutting them off. Nancy was even worse. She made it clear that I was selfish and out of line for being upset about her perfect day. Not once did any of them say, "We're sorry. What we did was wrong. How can we fix this?" It was always about how my reaction was the issue, never their actions. And no, they never paid me back. Not a cent. The whole "we'll pay you back eventually" line? That was just something they said to calm me down. There was never a plan behind it. As for my current situation, I'm okay. I've got a stable job in engineering, but I live in a high-cost area. I've got a small place of my own, a reliable car, and I can cover my bills. But I'm still working through that student loan debt. That $60,000 they took? It would have changed the entire course of my life, not just back then, but even now. The thought of taking on the cost and responsibility of 2 young kids? It's unimaginable. I'm still trying to stabilize my own future. As for Nancy? According to what little my parents blurted out that day, she just left. No warning, no explanation. Just walked out. Nancy told John she wasn't happy anymore. That she needed time to find herself, or something equally vague. She left, just like that. Took a bag and vanished. No one knew where she went. Her kids, as I mentioned before, are still very young. The boy is 7, and the girl is 5. It's a heartbreaking situation for them. I do feel for them, truly. They're just children, caught in the wreckage of choices they never made. Since I shut the door on my parents that day, they haven't let up. They call constantly, sometimes several times a day. I don't pick up. I just let it go to voicemail. The messages are a mix of my mom sobbing and begging me to talk, saying the children are confused, asking about their mother. My dad occasionally takes over with a firmer tone, telling me I have a moral obligation. That I'm being cruel. That I'll regret this. They've also started texting messages filled with guilt and desperation. How overwhelmed they are. How their health is failing under the stress. How they're simply not equipped to raise two traumatized children at their age. Then one evening, I came home from work and saw their car parked down the block from my apartment. They had waited for me. My mom got out and tried to come toward me while I walked to my door. I didn't say a word. I turned around, got back in my car, and drove to a friend's house for the night. I couldn't deal with another confrontation, especially one like that, ambush style. It made me furious. It felt invasive. Like stalking. Reading the comments on my original post, especially all the NTA judgments, really helped cement what I already knew in my heart. That they forfeited the right to demand anything from me the moment they stole my future and called it love. That family comes first only seems to matter when they need something. Not when I was the one suffering. So many people pointed out what I had already been thinking but couldn't quite articulate. They were trying to dump the consequences of Nancy's failure and their own terrible choices onto me. Again. And honestly, nothing about how I feel has changed. I'm still furious about the college fund. That betrayal runs deep. I've had to build my life from scratch because they handed everything I had to my sister, so she could throw a fairy tale wedding. If I gave in now, what would that say? That no matter how badly they treat me, I'll always show up to clean up their mess? That I'm some bottomless well of time, energy, and money, just waiting for them to take as they please? I can't do that. Yes, I do think about the kids. I won't lie, there's a part of me that aches when I think of them. But that's not enough to make me set fire to the life I fought so hard to build. I haven't responded to any of their messages. I'm seriously considering changing my phone number since they now know where I live. Some folks suggested legal options, and I've been looking into that too, maybe even sending a cease and desist. It feels drastic, but the constant pressure is starting to feel like harassment. For now, I'm standing firm. I am not helping them. I won't raise Nancy's kids or fund another disaster. That choice doesn't feel good. In fact, it feels heavy, like carrying a bag of bricks around everywhere I go. It makes me angry, anxious, and sad that it even came to this. But if I fold, I'll be throwing myself right back into a toxic dynamic that nearly broke me once. I won't let that happen again. Thank you to everyone who shared support. Your voices helped me feel less alone in all this. Update 2, 1 month later. Hey everyone, just another quick update. I wish I could say things settled down after my last post, but they didn't. After the day they showed up outside my apartment, the voicemails kept coming. I didn't listen to most of them. I just deleted them. Same routine, my mom crying, always my mom. Then, about 2 weeks ago, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I picked it up because I was expecting some work-related calls. Big mistake. It was my aunt, my mom's sister. She opened with, "I know you don't want to talk to your mom, but I had to call you. It's getting desperate." I was about to hang up. But she just kept talking, and for some reason, I froze. She said my parents were falling apart. That my dad's heart condition was getting worse. That my mom spends every day crying. She said they can barely manage to feed and dress the kids, that the house is in chaos, that they're almost out of money. Then she switched gears, her voice hardened. She told me I was being cold. That I was cruel. She admitted what my parents did with the college money was wrong, but said it was just a terrible mistake made under pressure, and that they still love me. She asked me if I could really live with myself, knowing my decision might put 2 young children, my blood, into foster care. Then she shouted into the phone, "Are you really going to let that happen? Just because you can't let go of something that happened ages ago?" And something inside me snapped. That calm, detached strength I thought I'd been holding onto, it just shattered. I started yelling. I told her it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice over and over again, for months. They stole from me. They didn't just ruin a plan, they ruined my foundation. I reminded her I was basically homeless at 18. That I was living out of a bag and crashing on a friend's couch. That I lived on ramen and worked until my body gave out. Where were you then? I screamed into the phone. Where was all this family comes first crap when I was falling apart? Funny how family only seems to matter when I'm the one being asked to fix something. I told her I wasn't the one letting those kids down. Nancy is. And so are my parents, for enabling her all her life and creating the person she became. I ended the call by making it clear, don't contact me again. And passed that message along to everyone else. I said that if anyone shows up at my door again, I'll call the police. I'm done. I stood in the kitchen shaking afterward. I felt sick. I spent the rest of that night blocking her number, my parents' numbers, and any other relatives I could think of. The fight didn't fix anything. It just made the emotional weight heavier. Update 3, 2 years later. Hi again. I don't know if anyone who followed this story is still around, but I wanted to post one final update, for closure, mostly. It's been 2 years since that last awful phone call. Not long after, I got a job offer in a different city, about 4 hours away. I packed up, sold my little apartment, and left without telling a soul where I was going. New job, new apartment, new phone number. I was finally free. For a while, it was peaceful. I had space to breathe. I thought maybe, finally, that chapter was closed. Then a few months ago, I was shopping at a big grocery store and heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw Matt, my cousin on my dad's side. We were never that close growing up, but we always got along. He was in town for a work conference. We were both stunned to see each other. He didn't know the whole story, only that there'd been some huge fallout. We ended up grabbing coffee and catching up. That's when he filled me in on what had happened since I left. Turns out, everything my aunt said on the phone back then was true, and worse. My parents couldn't handle raising the kids. Their health collapsed under the pressure. My dad had a minor heart attack about 6 months after I cut contact. My mom broke down emotionally. Eventually, a neighbor called CPS. After an investigation, the children were removed from the home and placed into foster care. Losing the kids destroyed what was left of my parents. They had to sell the house I grew up in. Couldn't afford it anymore. Now, they live in a small, one-bedroom subsidized apartment for low-income seniors. And Nancy? Matt said she was found about a year ago. She's been battling serious addiction and mental health issues. She's had minor run-ins with the law. She's homeless. She hasn't seen her kids in years. The state officially terminated her parental rights as well as John's. The only silver lining, if you can call it that, is that the kids were kept together in the foster system. Matt said my parents tried to visit them early on, but it caused too much emotional distress. The visits stopped. They barely see them now. So, that's how it ended. My parents gambled my future on a wedding and lost everything. Their daughter, their home, their grandchildren, and me. Nancy got her fairy tale wedding. And it led straight into a nightmare. Her kids are growing up in the system. Their parents are alive, but nowhere to be found. Thank you, if you made it this far. Thank you for reading. Thank you for helping me hold the line when I didn't know if I could. That chapter is closed now.